there. Welcome to the Maker Manager Money podcast, a podcast about entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, founders, business owners, and business partnerships. From startups to stay-ups, to inspire entrepreneurs to keep going and future entrepreneurs to just start. I like to dive deep into the journeys of entrepreneurs who are making waves and shaping the future. Today, I'm thrilled to have Cody Schneider with us, a trailblazer in the AI-first company landscape and a serial entrepreneur with a knack for blending technology with marketing to create innovative solutions. Cody is the co-founder and CEO of Swell AI, a company revolutionizing content marketing with AI-powered strategies. He's also at the helm of Drafthorse, acclaimed podcast agency, and Schneider Media, showcasing his diverse expertise in digital marketing, podcasting, and AI. From his early days selling sneakers to his strategic role in influencer marketing and SEO, Cody's journey is a testament to the power of innovation, perseverance, and strategic thinking in today's digital age. I'm excited to explore Cody's entrepreneurial path, his insights into AI-assisted marketing, and how he's navigating the challenges and opportunities of the AI revolution. Welcome to the Maker Manager Money podcast, Cody.
Thanks, Kyle. Super excited to be here. So I appreciate you having me.
All right. Thank you for being here. I'm only 10 months into podcasting. So really my first question is, what does success look like for a podcaster?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really depends on the business that they're trying to build. A lot of what I see individuals do is like two paths. It's either I'm trying to get to a download volume where I can go and sell basically, advertisements with some CPM. That's why you often see people making business podcasts, because the CPM is super high, right? Or their RPM of what they'll be paid out by their advertiser. The other thing that I see people do often is they then build a business on top of this podcast or a podcast that they create. Great example of this is I've been on a couple shows where they're agencies. They basically use the podcast as inbound sales or like a sales like go-to-market mechanism. So an example of this is like podcasts are one of the most effective ways to have an excuse to reach out to anybody and be like, hey, I want have you on this show and we're going to record this, basically deep dive into whatever it is you're working on. And the byproduct that, the person gets from coming on that is, they get this recorded hour-long session that they can then turn into media that they can use across all their channels. So say, for example, you run like a digital web design agency and you're in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and you're trying to get new clients. This is like a really easy way for you to reach out to every business owner that exists in that area and interview them. And suddenly you're now in relationship with them. And like what you'll see happen is like you get phone numbers and then you're texting them and suddenly you're friends and then you're answering questions. And that just turns into these like natural evolutions of businesses. So anyway, just to kind of reiterate, I see those two paths being like the most common stuff that I've seen or I've done in the past in the podcasting space that might be interesting to your audiences. So I previously worked at this company called Rupa Health. Our whole thesis was that building owned media was going to be this incredibly valuable asset in the B2B software space. So we were a marketplace for lab testing. And so what we ended up doing is we started this podcast that was interviewing practitioners about how they were dealing with these like weird, like, gut health management, like kind of these chronic disease management things that nobody was talking about. And we ended up growing that podcast from like 0 to 150,000 downloads a month in about 6 months. And kind of the mechanism for that was really going after like, let's take industry experts and let's talk to them about their knowledge that nobody else has access to. And let's put that in public, right? And that kind of like, pulling the curtain back for people from a content perspective is super interesting, right? Because normally they have to pay for access for that knowledge. That same idea, we ended up, in an entirely different space. We saw that work in like biotech. So in the biotech world, I helped my friend build this podcast called the Biotech Startups Podcast. It's now like one of the top 10 life science podcasts in the US.
Wow.
But for them, what they focused on was like, let's just talk to founders that have started biotech companies and be like, what was the process you went through? And again, just like pulling back that curtain. And then for, their monetization strategy is like, we're going to promote our service, which is leasing biotech equipment to biotech founders. And then on the Rupa Health side, like with their health podcast, what they were trying to do is basically have every practitioner listen to this so that they were getting like knowledge, and then that would turn into them coming to the platform to ordering lab tests. So I think podcasts, like you either have to make them huge so that you can go and sell basically ad space, or you have to build a business that you're distributing through that owned media channel. I personally lean towards building the business that you're distributing. That's going to be the just most revenue generating. Like when you look at the payouts of podcasts from a CPM, like what you can go and sell advertising space, it's not awesome unless you really join a podcast network. But then there's all this, it's a really competitive landscape because it's easier than ever for people to do it. But in contrast, like if you have 1,000 people that listen to your show on a weekly basis, and you're selling a high ticket item that's like $3,000 to $5,000 a month in some type of consulting or service, I mean, if you get just 5 of those people, right? Like you have a $25K a month business, and that's suddenly like a real thing. Scale that up and you get 30 clients, and that's a million a year company, right? And again, that's only 30 out of that 1,000 people. That's totally realistic and doable. So anyways, yeah, monologuing there, but that's kind of a brain dump on the high level. So
No, I love it. So even to get $5,000 per month, like how many downloads, how many subscribers or listeners would you have to get just $5,000 a month?
Yeah. I think again, it depends if you're selling that advertising space.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll need at least it depends on the audience and the advertising space. But just to use an example, like the medical one, what we found is when they hit around like 250,000 downloads a month, which is a huge number, right? That at that point, I think they were getting paid like close to 100,000 a month for ad space on all 4 of the episodes, and then there was like small kind of, they call them like office hour episodes that were happening as well by an advertiser. But it was a health food company, like it was AG1. So that was who was paying for that. But again, if you're making like a business podcast, like you can go sell like MailChimp or Squarespace or one of these companies. It's going to be way more on you to probably reach out with those numbers and be like, this is the downloads that we're getting. Here's the consumption rates, et cetera. But that 5K number, that would be like something for sure that's more on the side of like, okay, I'm selling you some type of service. I think it's way more for most people, it's way more attainable to think like, okay, I'm going to get 5,000 downloads a month. So maybe 1,000 downloads per episode. And if I can get, again, 10 of those people to turn into like 5K a month or 3K a month clients, and we do some type of service like, AI powered SEO or like unlimited like clip creation, or some type of one of these digital services that are especially we could talk through all these things that we're seeing like people build in the agency space with these AI tools that are now coming out. But I think it's totally realistic to think like, okay, I can go and get 10 of those people out of those 5,000 that are listening on a monthly basis to pay me that kind of higher ticket number and start that initial business. So I think for a lot of people, they come at this and they're like, oh, I'm going to make this like viral podcast that's like huge.
Yeah.
And in reality, like the average podcast, like to be in the top 1%, like you just have to get like 5,000 downloads a month. It's actually insane. Like most people think that like you have to have this massive thing, and there are out there, but it's like it is so hard. And there's a reason that like there's not actually a ton of money in podcasting for advertising. Like there's 25 big companies, and like that's it, right? There's like it's the Sirius XMs, the iHearts, like they have all the shows. There's a huge consolidation that happened like after COVID in particular. And so the right now, the biggest opportunity is like using a podcast as a vehicle to promote a business that you own that has some type of like, long customer lifetime value.
That makes a lot of sense. And so that means like Rogan and other podcasts, they're not in the 1%, they're in the 0.00001%. I mean, they're
100%.
It's just stratosphere. It's a totally different
100%.
universe that they're living in. than the
And it's
majority of
totally possible
podcasters. Yeah.
too. Like I don't want to discredit like that it can't be done. Like and we see people do it all the time, right? The kind of the level of magnitude of sophistication that it takes to like climb now into that. So like for example, my friend, his name's Jonathan. He was previously the podcast producer for My First Million and The Hustle Daily and all these shows that are kind of these massive business podcasts and that are really on the come up. So for them, like they had, I mean, just as an example, like they were taking the episodes and then they were making like thousands of clips, right? Like variations. And then they were taking all those clips and they had like 30 social channels across all of the social media platforms, like Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. And so then they're testing all of those pieces of creative to see which ones go viral, right? And then they're like, cool, we found a banger. It went viral on TikTok. Let's test it now on YouTube Shorts. Let's test it now on Instagram Reels. Oh, let's also like come back and let's take that viral thing, but we'll use the same hook, but let's add like different insights at the end to see if we can make it go viral again on TikTok, right? So now imagine that every episode, they're doing that twice a week, right? And they're producing the volume of content at that scale, simultaneously like growing newsletters, like all these other like kind of marketing distribution strategies on top of that. YouTube has been a huge thing that we've seen like kind of explode in the last 12 months for podcasting as well, because there's a natural like virality that can occur on the platform. And in contrast, if you look at like, a traditional podcast hosting, like it's an RSS feed that goes to like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, there's no built-in virality on the platform. Like Spotify isn't going to like push a podcast to people if it go like an episode gets popular. Like it's just like a different mechanism of growth. Like it's way more word of mouth, or you have to like introduce people to that top of funnel. And in contrast, like somebody can just stumble upon your YouTube video, and if it has a good thumbnail title and you like hook them in the first 30 seconds, you're going to have a listener for 40 minutes, which is wild, right? So yeah, I think it can be done. It's just like what you have to do, and then the other piece of it is like you have to have amazing content as well, right? So it's like
Right.
amazing content and then also amazing distribution to get to that scale. But if you just have amazing content and like decent distribution, I think you can build, again, a 30 to 80K a month company on top of this with some type of high ticket service that's like digital that you're providing.
That's really helpful. And you've talked about some of the strategies. Let's talk about the tools as a
Yeah.
podcaster that they can use. So you've talked about amazing content. You talked about, pushing and promoting, content clips, things like that. What other strategies and what other tools would you recommend to businesses that are sort of getting into the podcast game and trying to be successful at it?
Yeah, yeah. So the stack that I always suggest to people is it's pretty straightforward. It's honestly what we use when I'm doing shows, but using something like Riverside or Squadcast. The reason for that is they do multi-tracking. So the recordings are done on each of the machines locally in HD. So if you have any internet connection issues, the upload still comes back with like a 4K like audio video. So record in Riverside, you then take that output and you put that into Descript. Descript is a like editing tool. I don't really use it for editing, and nobody I know that's serious actually does. But what Descript has that's super valuable is they have what's called Studio Sound. It's basically this AI like audio upscaling tool. The next thing that I do in Descript is I remove the ums and ahs or like any other filler words, and then I shorten the word gaps. At that point, drop that into like Final Cut Pro, and I put like the intro, outros. Maybe there's like some slides. Any of those kind of like changes that I'm trying to create. But at that point, the audio is you're in the top 5% of audio just by doing that, right? And that takes 5 minutes of focus time. Like all that processing happens in the background. From there, it really comes down to, okay, like I'm trying to repurpose that content. So I then would take that audio, I'd upload it into my hosting company, like Transistor. I'd upload it into into YouTube if I'm doing a video podcast. Now Spotify has this, or through Anchor has their hosting as well with video. I take that same video and I can upload it into a tool like Swell AI. So what Swell does is basically content repurposing powered by AI. So I give it a video file and it's going to make clips. It'll write blog posts. It'll make tweets. It'll make LinkedIn posts. It'll write your newsletter about the episode, like anything that you can imagine. It can basically transform it into it. So these templates are out of the box. At that point, it just wrote my podcast show notes. It wrote my YouTube description. It like, I take those, I put those into my hosting companies. I then now have all of these clips that I can download and distribute across all the channels. I go to my social media scheduling app, something like my friends are building this company called Assembly.marketing. So it's basically I upload all of those clips into Assembly and then schedule those out to all the channels I'm trying to do distribution through. So like TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. I just take the captions that were written by the AI, I drop those in there, and the article I go publish that on my website. Again, it's like copy and paste. We also have like connections in Swell where you can just like send it directly to WordPress, or if you're using Ghost for your hosting. And we're just adding like more integrations as people ask for them. So it's like Squarespace and whatever else anybody could use is on the like on our list. But yeah, at that point, you have now basically like you've recorded this in HD. You've edited it at like a quality level that is going to be, on par with what traditionally you'd pay $500 for from an audio standpoint, like from audio, like the upscaling. You've created all this media in the form of clips, in the form of posts, etc., and you've scheduled those out for distribution. And then the last piece is really you take that newsletter, you schedule that out within whatever your ESP is. Like we're using MailerLite currently and liking it just because from a price and just kind of structure standpoint. I copy and paste that in. The email is super simple, like podcast, or the subject line is like podcast, name of the episode, and then like, hey, name the newest episode of blah 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 podcast is live. Like, click this link to listen now. You link out to the Apple Podcast episode, and then below that, it's like a short paragraph that's super concise on what they're going to learn, like 5 key takeaways from the episode. And like then at the bottom, like if you have like a company, like your company that's sponsoring the podcast, like include that in there, whatever that upsell, like CTA, like nurture call to action is. Yeah, that's like the whole kind of stack that I'm seeing people do. And there's obviously like tons of different ways to kind of go about that, and like more sophisticated versions of it from a like distribution standpoint. But that is something like tomorrow, like in the next 24 hours, somebody could do what I just said, and they could have a podcast live and distribute it across all channels, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, all the places that people are listening to these. So yeah.
So with that podcast stack, what's a rough estimate for, like a monthly cost to a
Pricing. Yeah.
business for pricing?
Yeah. So Riverside is like $19 a month. I think the script is 30. Hosting, you can get it as cheap as like $10. And so I'll just do that math kind of live. So it's 50, we're at 60. And then Swell, depending on the volume, it's like 29. So at that point, you're basically like you're right around that $100 mark. You can probably get all of this done for around that $100 mark. And again, that's 4 episodes. That makes all the media that your company could need for like, and I think this is the biggest thing that I try to emphasize. Like, so why are we even talking about like content? So like content is a great way to build trust and positioning, especially long form content. Like when you think about like what a podcast is, like you have somebody in your ears for like an hour a week listening to you have like a conversation that's educating them. Like think about the level of trust that gets built through that like one to many conversation. And like just to kind of put it at scale and like get kind of a visual for people, like how often do you stand, like say you're getting 5,000 downloads a month, like how often do you stand in front of 5,000 people and talk to them about whatever it is that you're discussing, like
You'd
in
be
the form
lucky
of
to
a
do
panel?
that. Yeah. Once,
Yeah,
once a year
exactly,
at a big conference. It'd have to be a big conference though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But in contrast, it's like, okay, like if you have a podcast that you get 1,000 downloads per episode, like that's 1,000 people per week that you're standing in front of and having this conversation. You can't see them, you don't know they're there, but that's like that, that's the kind of the mental model that I try to express to people. So with that, like that's a piece of this. The other side is when you make this long form content, you can chop, like you can repurpose that and chop it up into clips for every channel that you're trying to do distribution through that your target customer exists on. So say your target customer is on LinkedIn, Twitter, they do email because everybody does. And then also they're on social, right? Like
Right.
TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, or whatever, wherever else. You have like with that video file as the source media, you have content for every channel that your customers on. So as a founder, it's like, oh, you're telling me like I can sit down for 2 hours a week, 1 hour of recording, 1 hour of post-production editing, and like 1 hour, and that other post-production like includes also my scheduling of the media. And I can have all of my content like done through that process. And the knock-on effect of, oh yeah, I have an excuse to reach out to business owners that I'm trying to get in relationship with and like invite them on the show, right? So all of those things kind of packaged together. It's one of the most high leverage things that I've seen. Again, and I've been in digital marketing space for like 10 plus the year. I mean, I think we're coming up on 15, which is crazy, but very seldom you like stumble on these kind of arbitrages where there's so much value that's produced from like such a small like amount of lift, and it's easier than ever to do these things. And so anyways, I'm like obsessed with them just because, and there's tactical things we could talk about too, where it's like you can do what are called so Apple Podcast episode URLs are technically a deep link on iOS devices. What does that mean? Let's unpack that. So if I am on an iOS device, like say I text you an Apple Podcast episode link, it'll open my Apple Podcasting app on my iPhone, right? So if I do a Facebook ad that's to that Apple Podcast link and it's a clip from the episode, and I target only iOS devices, when they click that ad, so say it's like, it could be this clip, right? Exactly what I'm talking right here. When they click that ad, it's going to open the Apple Podcasting app on their phone. And as soon as they hit play, that turns into a download. So why am I talking about this? Well, I can basically like pay to get downloads for this episode and introduce new people to this episode. So like that's one like tactical strategy. The other piece is like podcast SEO. So like people don't think about this, but like the podcasting apps are search engines, right? So like go right now and search like biotech, right? And so my friend's podcast is going to come up, biotech startups. That is incredible, absolutely intentional. We named the show the Biotech Startups Podcast because we wanted to come up for biotech. The only ranking factor of ranking on like Apple Podcasts in their search engine or Spotify in their search engine is the keyword there? Does the show get downloads? And then how competitive is the space? So like if you search, for another one as an example, like startups or the word growth or marketing, like my friend's podcast called In Growth We Trust is going to come up. And like for them, same deal, like help them with like growing this show. And we just named the show like In Growth We Trust because we knew that it would come up for the word growth. And then we added like marketing and these other things at the end of that. You can also then name the episodes so that they come up for those same keywords. And you can add that to the show notes as well. And like with those three things, as long as the show's getting downloads, you're going to basically start to get just like natural inbound that's coming organically. And then the layer on top of that is on the email newsletter side. So for the biotech one, as an example, we scraped every biotech founder that was a seed or Series A funded company in the United States. And then we slowly started to trickle them into a newsletter. So every day we'd upload 200 like people, and we'd immediately send them an email that's like podcast, like name of the most viral episode that we had, like that exact email template I was just talking about, where it's like the newest episode of the Biotech Startups Podcast is live. Click the link to learn more. They then click that link. It takes them to the episode to download. But what we see is like, this is a cold email technically, right? Like this is a gray list cold email, but we see open rates that are 45% plus, click through rates that are like 5%. Like I couldn't get that cold email to land in an inbox and get a click like that or like an open rate like that any other way. Like there's just zero, like it is one of the, again, just there's no other way you could even accomplish that. But for some reason, like so right now we're still early and people don't think that a podcast is marketing yet, right? Psychologically, like it hasn't been registered that this is just a marketing tool. And so for them, super receptive as long as the content that you're distributing to them is something that is relative to either their job or their career or their life, right? So anyways, this going down this rabbit hole of like, here's how to do distribution on like growing these shows, but hopefully valuable to your audience. So
no, I love it. I mean, it sounds like the 4-hour work week, really, because you're talking about maybe 2 to 3 hours
100%
per episode, roughly $100 a month. and the
100%.
ROI is that you're talking about is staggering. Let's go back to Swell. I want to stay on Swell for a little bit. So
Yeah, please.
and talk about kind of the features and things. I know you have also the ability to do like one podcast at a time. You have
Totally.
different kind of pricing, and you talked about $30 a month. So part of this, I want to kind of unpack. So LinkedIn posts, Twitter posts, these different kind of social media channel posts. So you're crafting one specifically for those channels, because I know LinkedIn maybe it's better to use emojis, and maybe Twitter it's not, or things like that. So you've already crafted this in, because what's happening to me is you're talking about what Swell Audio will do, and I'm going, well, I'm doing each of these steps manually.
Individually. Totally.
Yeah, using AI to help craft a LinkedIn post, using AI to summarize, a podcast transcript, and you've just packaged this whole thing together because you've been doing podcasting for so many years. You know exactly what a podcaster needs,
Totally.
and so that's what you've baked into Swell. Talk a little bit more about kind of maybe the
Yeah, yeah.
LLM behind Swell, and as well
Totally.
as kind of the features and benefits.
Totally. Yeah. So I think, to take a step back, like what are we actually trying to do with AI? Like what we're really trying to do is I'm trying to build automation workflows, right? Like I have a content for content marketing. I have a content output that I'm trying to create, and I'm trying to basically give an AI raw materials and then automatically generate that output, right? So we get asked all the time, like, what's the difference between this and ChatGPT? And I'm like, yeah, like you could do exactly what we're doing with ChatGPT. We're just going to save you like, a tenth of like 10x the time, right? And so let's break that down. So say, for example, like I go get a transcript made of my episode. I take that to ChatGPT and then I prompt it, okay, like, write me podcast show notes. And it's like, here's like, write me titles. And then I write a summary. And then I write like key takeaways with timestamps for my, like my chapters. And then I write extracted keywords. So I'm here and I'm prompting this thing like 10 times to get the output that I'm looking for. And that's just for one of these pieces of content that I'm trying to transform, the source material into. So like our view is that with AI, like chat is great as a sandbox, but I don't want to chat with AI. That's not my goal, right? Like my goal is to create the content output. So for us, that was kind of the epiphany really early on. And so what we've been building is what like we're like thinking about as like this is a content automation workflow where I create this template that's like, and we call it a prompt chain. So like when AI is the best when you break what you're trying to create down into steps. An example of that would be like, say I'm trying to write extremely detailed long form blog posts. If I just one shot it and I'm like, write a blog post, it's going to write me this like 400-word article that's like not super interesting. In contrast, if I say, hey, define the tone, style, and voice of this episode, defines that. And then I connect a prompt to like in a chain. So it's like I have that prompt one and define tone, style, and voice. Prompt two is then, okay, now create a extremely detailed blog post outline. So it creates that outline. And then in prompt three, I then say, okay, now write an extremely detailed blog post based off the outline that you provided in the tone, style, of voice that you provided above as well. So that whole like chat that I could do in ChatGPT, what we've built into Swell is that you can save that as a template so that anytime I provide raw material, which is the podcast episode, it's just going to automatically generate that output for you. But let's scale that up to it. Oh, it's not just a blog post. It's LinkedIn posts about key takeaways from the episode related to digital marketing. It's 10 tweets about key takeaways. It's a Twitter thread about key takeaways and like, telling a story arc narrative throughout it. It's a newsletter that's educational. It's a newsletter that's like promotional to like get people to actually go to the podcast episode. Like anything that you can imagine, you could basically like save as a template within this. And then the analogy I'm using more and more is like we're trying to do is like take raw material like oil and we're turning it into all of these different forms of outputs, whether that's gasoline or diesel or aggregate or plastics, whatever that is. You can save those outputs. And then as a marketer, once I have those saved, and like we have these just out of the box for you, right? So that like when a person signs up, there's all of these templates that they just automatically get generated. So out of the box, I just do that upload. And suddenly I have all this content for all those channels. So that's just the written content side. The other side is we automatically generate clips based off of like we built this way to identify, we call them entities, but it's basically like a idea within the episode. And it will look for hooks with the like in those entity segments. It finds that hook, and then it finds like insights after that hook, and then that's like we generate a clip based off that. And what we're working on currently, like right now, so say you provide like a side by side video of us. We just built a facial recognition like tool that will basically like it'll find the person that's speaking, and then we can like stack those people into a new pixel aspect ratio. So you could provide this raw file that's like in whatever format from like a guest and host, but it'll chop that up into, okay, now it's in a portrait landscapes, which is good for like TikTok and Instagram reels. And we're seeing that on Twitter, like and LinkedIn, that like side by side that's in a landscape format is doing better. But it'll just automatically generate each of those. I also will create captions on top of those posts for you because we see those go more viral. Like basically, as much of that workflow that people are already doing, we're just trying to automate that. And that's really like, I get asked this all the time. Like, how do you, like, I'm a business owner. Like, how do I approach AI? And like, how do I think about it? And the best thing you can do is like audit your process that you're doing currently and saying, okay, like, where can I fit tools into this process that I'm currently doing that removes the human, like, heavy lifting? And most of the time, like you can look at these processes and you're like, okay, 80% of what I'm doing, I can automate away, or I can delegate to like an offshore team member that's augmented by one of these AI tools, right? Just a side quest here for a second. Like my friend's company, he basically, this is what he does for a living. It's called GrantBot, but he does consulting, like automation consulting. This is a great business also if you're like trying to start a company right now and like you're like, what do I start? I would go do this in a heartbeat. Basically what he does is he like connects like Airtables and Zapiers and like these AI tools all together to create these workflows. And so like he does a lot of consulting in the real estate space, but tons of paperwork, paper pushing, emails, all this shit, right? And so what he ends up going and doing, and he comes into these companies and he's like, sweet, show me your process, audits the process. And he's like, awesome. We can automate 60% of your business away, like that your team's work, and make it more concise, less mistakes. And it's always running in the background. And so he comes in and does that consulting. And then like as a business owner, it's like, of course I'm going to pay you to do this, right? Like you're basically making my business more profitable, right? And the same team that I had, as an owner, like how they're thinking about it is like I can either I can make that team focus on things that are more high touch, more high value from the human level. And then for like Grant and his company, for what it turns into is then they put him on a retainer and they're like, hey, just continually audit our process and make sure that this is running in the background so that this, we continue our operations. Like it becomes like a pivotal, like cog in the machine in that operations process. So again, we're just like AI is an incredibly effective tool when you're augmenting the workflows that you're already doing. Anybody that's like, oh, you need to change your whole like process, or like you have to adopt this new way of thinking, or like I think that that's the really poor way to look at this, especially with how early we are. The better way to look at this is like, okay, what are the things that are extremely time intensive, and a great filter for this is like taking unstructured data and making it structured. The AI is incredible at that. So an example, like with Swell, a transcript, like the transcript of this episode is going to be really unstructured, right? It's going to be this back and forth, like the conversation's wandering. I just went on an anecdote talking about a friend's company, right? But AI is incredible at taking that unstructured thing. And I say, hey, like list the 10 key, like top key takeaways from this episode. And it's going to be incredible at pulling out and extracting that information. So thinking about it in that way for your business is going to be incredibly effective, like for any business owner, like, in the next 5 years. So that's kind of how I'm trying to communicate it to people and how we're using it internally and thinking about it from a content marketing side. So.
Well, thank you for the explanations and tools and strategies and anecdotes. I'm loving this because I'm a podcaster. I mean, I feel like I'm on a sales call and I am your next customer. So I'm going to sign up just simply because I'm sitting on like 40 hours of content, and the time it's going to take me to manually, even using AI tools, one-off tools here and there, to create the kind of promotion for each of these wonderful podcasts that I've recorded is staggering. I mean, it's overwhelming to think about it. You're my 31st guest, and looking back at 30 other guests, 30 plus hours, probably over 40 hours worth of content. So I definitely want to try Swell because it sounds like you're combining things like Rev, things like Opus and Munch, and all these other tools that do different things. You're combining them into one workflow automation. Like I was
Exactly.
thinking, I was going to have to use Zapier or some of these other automation tools to pipe into several different other software as a service AI tools. But now it sounds like Swell has kind of combined all of these into one platform.
Yeah, I mean, we're really trying to eat up as much of that workflow as possible. So like we're not probably going to go super upstream, like to the recording side. Like there's you can record in
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, Riverside, Squadcast. Like there's tons, Audacity. Is it Audacity? Yeah, okay, it doesn't matter. But there's tons of ways to basically create this. We're just trying to create that node within the process where it's like, cool, you give us just these raw media files, and then we're going to transform that into whatever output. But like stuff that's on a roadmap from a product standpoint is social media scheduling. So it's like, yeah, cool. We just made all these clips. Like right now, people are like downloading the zip and they export them to the social media manager, and then they like upload, they have to go schedule it out. On our side, we're like, oh, well, what if you just make like the time slots that you want these posts to go at? So it's like 7 a.m. across Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. And like it just made all these clips. You select them all, hit schedule. It schedules them as drafts automatically to those time slots that you created. And suddenly, like you have like, your entire weeks of social content scheduled out. You could do like, so basically building that social media scheduling in is a huge thing. The other piece that people like customers or clients are starting to ask for is the ability to do like manage their newsletters through us. So it's like, cool, you're writing this newsletter for me. Can you also just send it? And then you own that list just lives within there. So like, high level, how I'm thinking about it is like initially we started out as just like an AI writer for podcasters. We're like
Mm-hmm.
quickly evolving into like, I'm calling it like content repurposing powered by AI. And then in 2025, I think it's going to evolve like further into like content marketing powered by AI. And like what I'm really excited about is like, and it's kind of, weird to even say, but like we're getting to this point where like it's very possible that like a company could like market itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you have like a good product and like you plug into this software and it's looking at all your Google Analytics data and your social media data and like all your conversion data. It has all of that like that data flowing in. But the missing piece was like an AI or like, basically the analytics on top of that of what does all this mean? AI has now created like it's pretty good at understanding like what's happening. And just to talk about it on a small scale, like say you're doing this social media thing. So you have your social media scheduler built in. So you basically give this thing raw materials, it makes clips, it schedules them out to social, it posts them. We pull back the analytics data from the social accounts. And then we go back to and we're like, okay, cool. These clips perform better than the others. Like, what do they have in common from a transcript standpoint? Oh, they have X, Y, and Z in common. AI is incredibly good at seeing those trends. We then go back to your back catalog. I'm like, all right, let's find more clips like the ones that we just found, and let's schedule those out as well. And so it creates this like virtuous like growth flywheel that's happening where it's basically like learning the types of content that is most viral for the audience that you're going after and cultivating. And like that is entirely possible. And like from a, the academic in me is like interested on this idea as like, like again, can a company in a way market itself where it just I just plug in and it advises me like what it needs. Like we need content like this because we're seeing that perform like best on social. So like go do an interview with somebody that's in this like space. And it's that I from an idea standpoint, totally possible. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 5 years with all these tools that help these companies basically do their distribution and do their marketing for their growth.
Awesome. And I didn't mean in any way, it wasn't disrespectful at all to say, I feel like I'm on a sales call simply because
No, 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 no,
you're
no.
speaking my language. I'm like, I'm here for this is all I'm
No,
saying.
no,
Like
no.
I'm sold on the idea because I know from personal experience how hard it is to distribute content. It's one thing to
Totally.
record. This is the easy part. You and
Yep.
I are having this conversation, very easy to do. But once you record, the pressure that a podcaster, a business, anyone that records a conversation that wants to turn this into a, getting that on Apple, on Spotify, all these other places, and really promoting it properly, that's where all the heavy lifting is. And that's kind of
100%.
where I've been stuck at after, interviewing 30 guests. So
Totally.
now I'm hearing a way out of that pressure that I've been under to, get these, because there's just golden nuggets throughout all these founders, all of these entrepreneurs that I've interviewed.
100%.
So thank you so much for the explanation. I want to get just quickly, I know we don't have very much time left.
Yeah.
So Swell, was it born out of Drafthorse? And
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
Swell's taken it to the next level where content clips and also all that writing.
Yeah. So Drafthorse, how we basically brought that to market was we actually built that as an internal tool to do programmatic SEO for Swell. Programmatic SEO is basically like building like thousands of blog posts or landing pages through like programming, right? So, an example of this would be like I'm trying to write how to start XYZ podcast. So like how to start a sports podcast, how to start a book reading or book club podcast, how to start a finance podcast, etc. I would find all of those target keywords and then I would use AI. I built a prompt chain that basically is like write a detailed blog post outline for how to start a sports podcast. And then the next step of that, once it wrote that outline, it then goes and writes that article. But let's scale that up and like let's do that with 1,000 different keywords that are related to our audience. And so we basically built this tool to do like internal, like to do SEO. I was talking about it in public on Twitter, and people were like, "Hey, I want, I want that. Like, I want that thing that you guys are doing." So we spun Drafthorse out in a weekend. We basically took the code base that we had for Swell, and we're just like, let's just clone it over and like do some modifications from a kind of a UI standpoint. Yeah, so we launched that, and it ended up going viral in the first like 30 days. It got to 10K like MRR or recurring revenue, monthly recurring revenue, and the like how it fits into your marketing stack is like it's really on what I'm calling like commodity content. So there's kind of two sides of the spectrum with AI content, like commodity content. So it's like general knowledge the AI has that you're basically like deploying it to write about or like create content about. And then like thought leadership content, which is way more where Swell sits on that side of the spectrum, where like we give it a raw source material and then we're trying to generate like this kind of like new piece of or new idea based off of that source material I provide. But how Drafthorse works is like I can go and write and publish 1,000 articles related to my brand and have them on my website in 5 minutes, right? So like from like I put the keywords in to the articles being written to them being published on my website, it's 5 minutes later, right? And like you just publish 200,000 words in 5 minutes is the idea. So what this like how how we're seeing people use this and like go about with this type of like that commodity content that the LLM is writing from its general knowledge is that it's okay. Like the content that it's doing is just average, right? Because it's writing from that. So when we think about an LLM, like how they're trained is it basically like it scraped the whole internet and it like learned from the internet, but the internet is like a lot of it is really shit. And so it's going to write to the average of everything that it learned. And so when people are like, oh, it's not like, the LLM is it's just okay. It's like, like from the content output, like really what is happening there is that it's because it was trained on like the average piece. So this content that it's writing is like average. And so for us, like what we realized really early on with this whole thing is that like there's going to be this land grab right now in the SEO world where, I mean, and we're seeing this where people are just YOLOing. Like we did this as well, where we published 20,000 articles, like just to see what happened. Like my friend or my brother's in the medical space and he's like building this new company. And so we're just like, let's just publish 20,000 articles. So previously, if I wanted to publish 20,000 articles that were like at a quality that would actually rank, like that would cost us $2 million, right? Like we did it for like 2 grand. And that's the like scale of magnitude of how much cheaper it's gotten to just like produce this type of material. But what that's done for the business is like it took their daily clicks from I think they were around like 500 and they're now doing like 2,600 a day, right? And that's happened in the last 6 months. So that's like the amount of like organic traffic increase that happened in that time period. That's almost like 5x in 6 months. I mean, it's crazy like to even say that. It also sounds fake. I'm like, it's you don't see stuff like that happen often like in this world. But yeah, so like where I see this all going is it's going to converge. So like with Drafthorse again is writing from the general knowledge of the LLM. There's this whole other layer of that where you can actually, if you pull the source files from what's ranking currently for that keyword and say, hey, AI, like you're going to write this article about how to start a finance podcast. But the source that you're going to use to write that article is what's ranking in position 1, 2, 3, and 5 on Google already. When you give that like boundary of the source that it can write from, the content output that you get is at a quality that's like top 10% top, like, it's in that top 10 percentile rather than being that average that we saw previously when it's just writing from its general knowledge. And so we've seen these articles when we do this, like in 24 hours, they go to page one, right? Because it's like Google has already said, this is the good content that people will like. And we're just telling the AI, here's the example, just make something that's similar to this, right? So that's like a way to do this. Now imagine that scaled up where it's like for every keyword, we go and we scrape the front page and then we write based on that. But an even wilder side of this, and like what we're seeing these companies do, is they go and they look at competitors' websites and they sort by the volume. So they use a tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs. These are SEO tools. And they sort by the pages that get the most traffic for those websites. They extract the titles out of those pages. And then they go and they have the AI write to that title outline that they just extracted from a competitor's website. So like we've done this where, okay, cool. Like we just scraped like we'll say there's 900 blog posts on a competitor's website. We see that 80% of all their traffic comes from 100 of those posts. We write those 100 posts all simultaneously based off of like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is like right now, like the cost of content has basically gone to zero. So what happens when it goes like when any commodity like starts to like when the price basically approaches zero, right? Or it's a downward sloping curve that's approaching zero. You get way more like noise within the system, right? So what's going to become more and more important and more valuable as time goes on is your internal knowledge that you have in a database that you're using as source material is going to become more important than ever. What you like an example of this is like, say I asked the AI to write, hotel marketing strategies, right? And it goes and it writes, what it thinks is hotel marketing. Now, in contrast, say I go interview 5 hotel marketing experts about hotel marketing strategies. I record those 30-minute conversations. I put those transcripts into like our source document. And then I say, okay, AI, now write me an article based off of these transcripts about the best hotel marketing strategies. The content that comes from that expert knowledge is going to be so much better than what the general information of the AI has. So that's like our view on it, like of how these like the only way you're going to be able to differentiate your content anymore and your marketing strategy is by having this owned like library. And it could be not just yours, right? It can be just like things that you think are interesting that you found on the web. So like other YouTube videos that are like of creators that you like, or blog posts of creators that you like. And so like this is where we see Swell going, where it's like, imagine I can provide like, here's 3 blog posts as source material. They could be totally different things. But now I want to write this article based off of this outline that I provided, based off of that source material that I just gave Swell. And like, that's totally possible for our marketing team to go and do. Oh, and have it be in the tone, style, and voice that we defined. We want the AI to write in so that it always sounds on brand. So it doesn't matter who uses the AI software, like which human uses it. But like, you could have a team of 5, but it's always going to be the same type of content, like tone and style and voice that you're trying to communicate to have consistency across your brand. So again, more just all the stuff we're seeing on the front lines with this, but I think the hardest part right now is just what should I do? There's so much I can do. My suggestion for people is like pick 1 or 2 things that are like symbiotic in nature, and then just focus all of your efforts on that. So like a great example of this is like Google ads and like SEO, right? So it's like I have Google ads running to my business. I have a conversion event that's like a sign up or a call or et cetera. And then whatever keywords ends up converting for my business on those Google ads, I go and I write SEO content using an AI writer or whatever that I'm going to try to rank that page for that same keyword that we know created a conversion for my business, because I know that long term, if I can get that page to rank, that's going to provide, inbound leads for my company, right? So it's doing these 2 things together that create a long-term impact, and not focusing on like, the 20 different marketing strategies I could do. Just pick 2. Like you're going to be in the top 10% of companies if you just pick 2 things and do that for 2 years. So yeah.
That's great. And I apologize for calling it Draft House. I think I've visited a few draft houses in my day.
No. It's all good. It's all good.
Drafthorse.
It's all good.
And you spun Drafthorse out of Swell for this need. And you can do everything that you talked about with Drafthorse. You can
So
give
you
it
can go
your
in there.
expert knowledge. You can get it in your own voice, and you can crank out content that way. It's not just doing what anyone could do with ChatGPT. It has other features.
The big thing or like how people use Drafthorse is bulk content writing. So like an example of this is like how to start XYZ business, or like how to start XYZ online business. Like we have a website that I own that we did this with, right? So we basically found every like how to start XYZ online business and like keyword, and then we wrote like 10,000 articles for every one of those. It's just writing from the general knowledge of the LLM. But the core idea is like I can publish 10,000 articles in 24 hours for this website, right? So we see like a lot of niche like website owners or like bloggers use us as a way to like just fill out their site with more content so that they get more affiliate traffic, et cetera. So it's just a tool within the tool belt of your marketing, right?
Right.
Like again, Swell is all of that thought leadership content. Like tools like Drafthorse are like, that's just, I'm doing bulk commodity content production because it's a land grab right now. And we know that over the next 2 years, like this is going to change. But right now in this moment, it's like the thing that we can do that just like 0 to 1s, like a ton of content simultaneously. And again, the impact to the businesses is like what we're more focused on. Like, I don't really care like what tool or how it gets done. Like people always ask me like, what's your stack? How are you doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, honestly, like I'm just doing whatever gets the output like that I'm looking for as easy as possible. Right. And again, with anything that I'm building or using, like that's the filter through all of this.
Do you have a hard stop in 1 minute? Do you have just a couple?
Yeah, sorry, I do need to jump, but
okay. Can I just do a lightning round of questions? I know we didn't.
Please fire away. Let's do it. Yeah.
Questions, but let's just go through this lightning round and we'll wrap up. So, are you a musician?
I do. Yeah, I actually did music production at one point. I thought that was going to be my career. I was like making trap beats like back in, I don't even know. This is probably like 2014, and selling them on the internet. This is in the early days where you could just like throw stuff on YouTube and then sell licenses to it. Yeah, there's a point where I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And then I play guitar and, did lyric stuff. I do a little work in the music industry, actually, still out of Nashville. I work with Sony Nashville out there doing some marketing consulting for them. My friend, his name's Colby Akoff. He's a country music musician who's on their label, but he's going on tour with Luke Combs this year. So still involved in the space. Want to do a company in the space at some point, but yeah, I definitely have an interest in that world. So
love it. Favorite candy bar?
Oh God, I don't know on that. Probably Twix. Yeah.
Favorite music artist?
Oh, right now, Dominic Fike. I've been obsessed with him. Yeah, he's. I don't know. I just think he's doing really interesting stuff. Him or Gene Dawson are 2 that I'm kind of obsessed with currently.
Gonna have to look them up. That's awesome. Favorite cereal?
Oh God. Probably Captain Crunch, even though I never eat it.
One of my all-time faves. Mac or PC?
Mac all the way, just because that's what I know. Grew up with a G3 that had like Photoshop and Illustrator on it, and that's how I kind of stumbled into this world. Yeah, without it, I don't even know what I'd be doing. I'd probably be like a lineman or some other. I'm from like a podunk town, so anyways.
Google or Microsoft?
Microsoft right now, I think what they're doing is unbelievable with this whole AI adoption thing. Also, like, I mean, just their CEO is one of the most gangster, like, just business people in the game at the moment.
Agreed. It's a Copilot killing it right now. So
Unreal.
let's see. Dogs or cats?
Probably dogs. Yeah, for sure.
Phantom or Les Mis?
Oh God, Les Mis, just because I've seen it more.
Okay. All right. So what's something that most people don't know about you?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. I actually am like pretty anti-internet. That's a big thing. I look at it as a tool, but I don't have social on my phone. I try to be offline as much as I can. The all of it's fake because of people like me, and like everybody's selling you something because of people like me. And so kind of look behind that veil and then made choices, like 5 years ago to adjust to that. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I think get off, touch. We always joke like go touch grass more, right? Like it's needed by all people. So but yeah, that's kind of the thing that I would say.
I love it. Thank you so much, Cody. I have learned so many things. One of them is that I probably need to put entrepreneur in the title of my podcast somehow. I think that's going to help a lot.
I would even niche down more, Kyle. I would have it be like side hustle or first business or like something that's even more niche.
Okay.
I think that you could probably rank for something like that. It depends on your audience, but
Because
like
entrepreneur is just too broad.
it's super competitive, right? But in contrast, like if you went after something that's like how to like side hustle, right, or whatever, like some other variation of that, but it's like a more like niche down version of it, like whatever people are like trying to start their first business, like the word that they would search for that. I think you could rank for something like that and get a ton of inbound that way. Like if I was in your shoes, that's probably what I would do to like accomplish that what you're trying to. So, but anyways, not to digress.
Well, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to interviewing the founder of an AI first company, and you're my first. I've got two more in the next couple of weeks. So this has been a great kickoff to that. I love what you're doing. I look forward to following your entrepreneurial journey in the coming months and years. So thank you for being so generous with your time and your knowledge today.
Happy to do it. Thanks you for having me, and super excited to see where you go. I'll have to come out in a couple months. We can talk more about how you're doing and what's going on with your growth, and also about the companies and stuff and what we're seeing on the front lines. So
let's do it. And if you're ever in Utah, let's do it live.
I love it. Sounds great. Thank you again, man. Have a good one. We always joke like go touch grass more, right? Like it's needed by all people.